doing that, I was face to face with it. It was holding me by my throat, and it felt like it was sucking something out of me.
I probably should have been more scared than I was when I witnessed the exorcism.
I turned and looked on my right side. When I did, there's a beam on the side of the tree, a large beam. It's looking at me and I'm looking at it.
After I hit the lock button and looked back up, I saw red eyes staring back at me.
That they're going to show multiple gods all over the earth, to be able to speak in people's languages, and at that point it kind of converge into this one entity, which will be revealed as extraterrestrial. You'll realize that aliens are the gods of old, and at that point it'll wipe religion out of the context of humanity.
No way, it couldn't have been a person, I know that. I know that people can't run through the woods like that.
So this thing comes into view, and I see it. It's 50 yards away from me. It's walking on two legs. It's huge. This is a big, hairy-looking being.
Welcome. I'm your host, and this is uNcomfortable. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it featured on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65, and please remember to leave us a 5-star rating and review where you can. That is the main way you, as the listener, can help get this show out in front of others. The more people listening means more people coming forward with their experiences for you. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a couple of things to cover here. Events that are coming up. September 9th marks the second annual Bigfoot and Brews in Dowagiac, Michigan. This year, Robert Kreider and Stacy Brown Jr. will be the speakers. This year's event is a little bit more expanded than what we had last year. There will be a VIP dinner and screening of Stacy Brown's latest installment in the Skunk Ape Experiment on Friday night. Tickets are available now. You can find the link for that Eventbrite in the show notes at the bottom of this episode. Also, you can find it on Facebook at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. Then just about a month later, October 6th, 7th, and 8th, you can join myself, the Cryptids of the Corn, Hollow Sky Podcast, and Kill the Mockingbirds, along with Appalachian Intelligence, for the Fortean Airwaves Podcast Conference in Ada, Ohio. Tickets are only $50. That gets you a meet and greet on the evening of Friday the 6th, a full-day conference with all of us in a panel on the day of the 7th, and a special pancake breakfast the morning of the 8th with all of us as a nice little way for us to send you on the road and say thanks for hanging out with us. All the information you need will be in the link tree that is in the show notes. You can visit any of the aforementioned podcasts for links and information. $50, people. You can't beat it with a stick. An entire weekend with some of your favorite podcast hosts, all talking about the weird. Don't forget, Uncomfortable Patreon is live. Head over to patreon.com/uncomfortablepodcast770 and check out the 3 different levels we have there. See if anything appeals to you. Patreon at the $5 and $10 levels per month gets you access to the 2 video series that I've been doing, one being A Little Uncomfortable and the other being Uncomfortable Afterthoughts. Make sure to give that BetterHelp sponsor spot a listen. About halfway through the first half of the show, there's a promo link that will also be in the notes. And if you follow that link, you can get up to 10% off. Not up to, you can get 10% off your first month of services. Mental health is no joke. take your time to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Now, for tonight's show, I don't usually get to do this very often by having my guest in studio tonight. And we will be kind of flashing backwards just a little bit to episode 104, which was entitled, What the Hell Was in the Michigan Sky? If you remember that episode, I had two gentlemen on there, Bill Konkolesky and Jack Bouchon, who were featured in Unsolved Mysteries on the new Netflix series. The MUFON director, Bill Konkolesky, if you recall, we covered that flap of sightings quite extensively and even got some real-world information coming in as one of the unknown objects that had been located and downed over the Canadian Yukon happened while we were actually recording the show. In that conversation, the MUFON director admitted to over 100 more sightings of that 1994 event that's featured in the Unsolved Mysteries episode. Tonight's guest actually saw the same lights that were featured in that episode later on during the summer of that same year. Now, the MUFON director, in his admission, reported that that was an ongoing flap throughout most of that year. And tonight's guest, John, is going to discuss the couple of experiences he had along the Michigan shoreline. So if you're ready for it, let's get into it. If you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to tonight's guest, John. John, welcome to Uncomfortable.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thanks for being here, my friend. This is a crazy one because I remember, I lived here during the time of it. I remember when it happened. It made news, and having been into the UFO topic myself for years since I was a little kid, that was kind of a holy crap moment when over 300 people reporting this in March of '94. But you and I, we used to work together, and I can remember at the inception of telling you that I was going to start doing a podcast. You were supportive. You said it was cool. I don't think you thought that I was going to probably take it as far as I have, but
no, that was a great idea.
Thanks to the listeners for making that happen. But we had a conversation over in your department, and you started to tell me about something that was very, very similar. And it wasn't until like in the past year that I tried to get you to pin it down to when that happened.
Right.
And you weren't really sure.
Right. You'd think, seeing something like that, you'd cement that in your mind, but it was almost 30 years ago.
But what you did give me was one little piece of information that let me track it down and realize that it was the same year.
Right.
Because you had talked about a large tire fire that was blazing in Gary, Indiana, and you could see it from the shores of Lake Michigan.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I had actually seen the news report before we'd actually went out to the lake for that night. It had, just had started. It was a big deal. It was all over the news. And our friends and I were out there. We could actually see the cloud of smoke across the horizon, and we were talking about it. That's why I remember that the time was during this big fire, tire fire, but I didn't really know exactly what time.
So I went back and I started looking online, and I found that tire fire had started in early June of 1994.
Was it June?
And it burned for several months.
Yes.
They weren't able to put it out. So it does exactly coincide with later on that same year.
Right.
So if you if you would, I know it was brief, but let's get into the couple experiences that you had.
All right. Well, step up to the mic here.
You can pull it closer to you.
Well, I'm petting Maverick here. He's a little boy. The very first time we seen it, I was with some buddies up in Grand Mare, Stevensville. And back in the early 90s, the state parks weren't very monitored, so we'd go there in the middle of the night, and a lot of other people would kind of hang out there, and we'd start a small campfire and hang out. And I was a late night worker, so I was used to being up all night and sleeping all day. So my buddies and I would go out there and hang out. And we're hanging around the campfire, and one of my buddies had wandered off to do his business and hadn't returned. And I started wondering where he'd went to, and it was fairly bright out. The moon was bright enough that we could see everything. You know, you could walk around all right. And I seen him on one of the dunes just staring out over the lake. I didn't know what he was looking at. You know, I thought maybe we'd talked about the cloud and stuff earlier, you know, and the fire. And he was just fixated, and he's, "Did you see that?" And I looked out over there, and I thought we were seeing, you know, O'Hare or Midway and jets coming and going, you know. And we sat there for a while, and he says, "No, you don't understand. Watch it," you know. And we're watching these lights out over the water, and I wasn't really seeing anything spectacular. It didn't really pop out at you. And as the night got darker, you could kind of tell where Chicago and I'm guessing Milwaukee was, because of the cloud cover on the other side of the lake. You could see the light pollution in the sky, so you kind of get a base idea where these large cities
where the bigger cities were. Yeah.
And I'm watching this one, and I just really couldn't put my head together as how this thing was moving. First, I thought, well, maybe there's a crop duster out there practicing, or maybe there's a stunt plane out there, because it would go straight up and then come straight down, then it would shoot left and right. And one time it kind of did like a circle thing out there, and I didn't know, what to make of that.
Yeah.
And we're watching that, and I was like, what is that? My buddy Russ was out there, and he's the one that's seen it first. And I think there was 3 of them out there at one time, but we were watching these things, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm thinking, well, I know there's a naval base, or there's a training facility out there, so I'm thinking maybe there's training out there. It's nighttime, but it was kind of weird to just watch this thing going back and forth. But it really didn't strike me as really odd until I watched this thing go down to where the lights in the sky were kind of where Chicago was. It went from there all the way down the coast, went north to the coastline to the other bright spot, which I'm thinking probably Milwaukee. It shot that distance 2 seconds, just zip. There was very, very little acceleration. It just like somebody took a laser pointer and zip, just moved it over there.
Yeah.
And then it went straight up into the clouds. And when it did that, it flickered. The clouds just started just scintillating different colors, and it looked like almost like heat lightning. And it did that for a little while. Then it stopped, and it just kind of dropped out of the cloud. And it's just a speck of light from where we're standing, And it zipped back down towards Chicago and went up into the clouds and did the same thing. And it did that for a while. And, Russ and I are like, what the hell's going on? What is that, And we watched this thing probably for 10, 20 minutes do that. And every now and then it would stop out somewhere in between, and it would go up and down, and it would just stop and just sit there for a little while. And then it would zip one way or the other. And it didn't seem to have any rhyme or reason, And after a while, we watched that, and then we realized that, hey, this thing's coming straight at us. And it took maybe as long as me to say, Russ, I think that's coming straight at us. What the fuck is that? And he's like, I don't know, man. And about that time, that's when the thing flew over us.
No
and it was
kidding.
huge. And it was just like a big, bright light, but it wasn't like a spotlight shining down in your eyes. It was, I like to describe it as, I don't know, somebody cut a hole in the sky and there's light on the other side. Because you're like looking into a hole as it went over you. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. But
that's an interesting way of putting it.
You couldn't see anything other than the light, but it wasn't like blinding bright. It was just a soft, white, bluish kind of light. And the best I can describe it is it kind of looked like you were looking into a hole with a light on the other side, you know. And it was hard to tell how big it was because that's all you've seen. So you had nothing to really reference it by. It was dead silent. And it flew straight over us and flew straight into outer space. I mean, we watched it go out for a while and then just blip out. And from crossing the lake to the time it blipped out, maybe 10, 15 seconds. You know, it was enough to us to go, what the hell is that? I don't know. What is that, Russ? I don't know, man. And off it went. And
so you were on the western side of the state of Michigan, facing
Chicago.
Yeah. So you were facing westward. You know, the description of where you're placing this is almost identical to where the event in 94 eventually moved down the coastline. And once it got to about Benton Harbor, it moved out into the lake towards the Gary area. And oddly enough, according to Jack Bashong, for the weather radar in Muskegon at the time, that was the only open water in the lake. Everything else was frozen over because it was March.
Oh, okay.
But for whatever reason, they congregated over that open water. And if I'm not mistaken, at some point during that, the three objects that had been seen all the way from Muskegon and moved the way down, there were up to 20 of them that had congregated and were moving up and down in elevation.
See, it was hard to tell how many were there because I think there was still jets and stuff, you know, flying around at that night. But I think we've seen 3 of them flying around across the lake, but only one flew over us.
Uncomfortable is pleased to have BetterHelp sponsoring this episode. 10 years ago, I found myself in the midst of something I never expected. I was in crisis. I needed help. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but my pride and my embarrassment of having to ask for help kept me from seeking in-person therapy. Had BetterHelp existed back then, it would have made a world of difference to me. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you will tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and your preferences in therapy. Then, BetterHelp will match you with the right therapist from their network. You can then talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone call, or even video call. You'll be able to message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If for any reason your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you'll get the same professionalism and quality that you would expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, with more scheduling flexibility and a more affordable price. With this offer, get 10% off on your first month at betterhelp.com/uncomfortablepodcast23. That's betterhelp.com/uncomfortablepodcast23.
Yeah, dead silent. It took a couple minutes later. It's when the fighter jets flew right over us, doing the same trajectory, just hauling ass, and they were loud as shit. I don't know if you ever been out to like Notre Dame when the flyover goes by.
Yeah,
they were that low. It was nighttime, and we could actually see that they were military jets. Just there's two of them. They just hauling ass.
So no mistaking, they were in pursuit of.
Yeah, because we could see them come up over the horizon, and we thought maybe that was two more of them, but they didn't come across as fast as this thing that went over us did, and you could definitely hear the jets. This other thing went over us dead silent. All you could hear was breeze.
So the additional ones that you thought maybe you had seen out there, did you ever see their exodus?
No, they could have, things were going up into the clouds and flashing, and they did that a couple times, and they could have been multiples doing that. It was, you'd watch one and the other one could be over there doing its thing, but it looked a little like heat lightning, except it flashed constant. It wasn't just like a couple flashes here. It was just like flickering.
Like a discharge of energy or something inside the cloud.
Like a disco ball, or it was colorful.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, heat lightning's usually just kind of a white and flashy kind of thing. This was red and blues and just colors. But when it came out of the clouds, it was just a white light.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, I had told Bill Konkolesky about your report, and I was asking him that if at a later date we could put together another show, and he could bring to the table a series of additional reports of literally the same thing along the shoreline of Lake Michigan in the latter months of that year. Right. And he said that there were upwards of 100 or 120 that additional reports, and they had gone through the various months throughout. So your experience falls right in line with that being an ongoing flap of people seeing these things out over Lake Michigan.
Right. Then I think it was August when we went back there, and we were just hanging out doing the same thing. And we seen something float down the shoreline on our side, just right off the shoreline. And our first thought was, DNR or fishing boat or something like that. And we knew we weren't supposed to be out there. So me and, you remember, Jonas came down to the beach with me, and there's a kind of an embankment right before you go out to the main shoreline. I don't know if you've ever been to Grand Mare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, several times.
But we kind of peeked our head up over that embankment. We thought, well, if they're getting ready to, drop somebody off and come bust us for being kids,
Yeah.
We'd kind of scout it out. And what we got down there and seen was kind of hard to describe. What I thought was a boat was just something in the water. Now, the waves were really choppy, and this thing was just a couple yards right offshore. So, we had probably 2-3 foot waves out there. This thing was dead calm. It wasn't rocking. It wasn't moving around. And the center of it, you couldn't really see it very well. It was, I like to say, it was hard to focus on. Your eyes just couldn't see it.
Yeah.
But there was a small bluish colored light that would circle around this thing.
No kidding.
And it was real slow and just kind of methodically just kind of going around. And it was coming from the south, and it just made its way up to, it was making its way north along the eastern shoreline of Lake Michigan. We watched it until it just kind of blipped out of sight, but it was heading towards Cook Nuclear Plant, and
you have Cook there, and then you had Palisades in just outside of South Haven.
Yeah,
as
Van
well.
Buren. Yeah. But I thought when we were first looking down there, we were going to go see a boat.
Yeah.
It wasn't a boat. I don't know exactly what that was, but you could see it shining light into the water too. There, it was kind of that bluish white light, but whatever was shining it down in there, you couldn't really see it. It was just kind of a blurry thing. And
so the main light what color, what spectrum of color was that in? You said you had the blue light that was going around it.
Yeah, it was. That's all you could see was the blue light, and it was just kind of, I don't want to say shadow, but it was like there was really nothing there. There was no shape.
I got you.
The only thing that gave it any context was this blue light that was circling.
Yeah.
But the middle part of it was just kind of a dark, blurry mess. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
It's strange that you describe it as being hard to focus on.
Yeah, it was. It was like, it was hard to focus on. Is the best way I can describe it. My eyes wouldn't focus on it, except for the blue light that was going around it.
What was what were the discussions after you guys had seen these two different instances? I mean,
well,
between you and your friends, I mean, the other people that had witnessed it.
The other folks that were with us didn't even notice what we were watching. We were on another dune on the other side of the park. Mm-hmm. You know, we were watching it from there. They only noticed the jets going by, and then they called us full of shit when we were talking about the lights and the flickering and all this stuff. So it was only me and Russ that actually seen that, and the others were just kind of focused around their conversation and the campfire and stuff, and we didn't have any time to actually go say, "Hey guys, look at that! Look at whoa!" Because it was, by the time we realized what was going on, it was over.
Yeah. So, like, all told, that first experience where you saw the lights going up into the clouds and coming back down and then eventually flying over you, what would you say time-wise you guys were able to watch that for?
I don't know how long Russ had been watching it, but I would say I watched it for about a half an hour.
So that was a prolonged.
Yeah, first it was trying to wrap my head around it, because first I didn't even see it. I didn't see what he was looking at, and then I noticed, because sometimes when he was looking at it, it was just sitting still, and it sat still for a long time, and then it wasn't until it moved that I was like, well, is that a helicopter? Because it was sitting still, and then it moved, and then sat still again, and it's like it was hard to tell how far away it was and just how much distance it was actually traveling. Right. And my first thought was, this thing's in the middle of the lake, and it's either a helicopter, maybe looking at the fire, but why would it be out at midnight or whatever time it was when we were outside? And it was. I watched it for about a half an hour, I would say, before it finally flew out over us and out. And
well, I've spent an inordinate amount of time on Lake Michigan, especially like in the South Haven area. My parents had a boat there for years, and my summers were pretty much growing up there. And from South Haven, on good clear days, you could see the Gary area. I don't remember ever actually seeing completely across the lake and seeing Chicago with the naked eye.
I have seen it on clear days, but you can definitely see the lights at night.
The ambient light, yeah.
If it's cloudy over there, you can see it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, our side of the lake was clear. I mean, I remember being able to see very well, in the middle of the night. I've been out to Grandmere on moonless nights, and it's pitch black out there. Yeah. There's nothing. You can't see anything, but it was a fairly well lit night because I could see Russ standing out on that other dune, and I made my way over there. And it was an experience, and I really never put the two and two together, because we were in the middle of the Gulf War and stuff, and my thought was, well, maybe that was a stealth fighter going on. I didn't know what those things could do.
Yeah,
maybe they were training those at the middle of the night, and it still could be plausible. I don't know, but I would think that my buddy was in the Air Force, and he was over in Turkey, and he'd say when those bombers took off, they would actually hit the afterburner to get off that runway. He said it sounded like hell on earth when those things flew out of there. And this thing was dead silent, and I don't know if those things fly silent or, and I didn't even really think about it until you started talking about, well, there was a big mass viewing back in the 90s. And I was like, well, maybe. And then when you said it coincided with the timelines, well, maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I definitely knew it was something off. And
that's
most of our friends were giving us shit over it. It was like, yeah, whatever, you know. What do you think those jets were flying after, you know? Yeah. And
that to me right there, you know, having the two military jets come over the same trajectory, you know, in a pursuit line with what flew over you, to me that's a telltale sign that what you saw is what we think it was.
It was definitely concerning.
Yeah.
You know, but the way it looked, it was just weird. It was because it went straight over us, so we were looking straight up at it as it went over, and it looked like you were looking into a hole, a bright hole in the sky is what it. Well, it was kind of oblong, but it was. I couldn't tell how high it was.
Kind of oblong. What do you mean?
Well, it was roundish, but it still looked kind of oblong. It wasn't like completely round.
Yeah.
But it was just weird. It was almost like, I don't want to say crystalline, but it was definitely wasn't like a light. It was, you were looking at something different, and I can't describe it. It's, a lot of times I try to tell people, if you take a laser pointer and point it at a wall and you look really close to it, and when you move it around, the way the light reflects back to you, it kind of glistens a little bit. That's what this looked like, except it was white, a bluish white light, and it was inside a hole in the sky. You know, that's what it looked like. And you know, it was more than just a light.
Right. Can you say whether or not the light that you saw was it emitting? If it had been closer to you, do you think that light would have illuminated you or not?
I don't know. Maybe it's hard to tell. I mean, it was still light, but it wasn't like you were staring at a spotlight or anything like that. It was just a very
like an ambient glow,
a soft light. Yeah. You know, we're in the flight line for the landings of South Bend Airport. You know, and we'll always see planes coming by, and they fly right over our house with the, you know, landing lights and stuff on, and it wasn't nothing like that. You know, it was definitely not a commercial airline or anything like that. There was no indicator lights or anything flashing off. It was just the one light, and it was big. I want to say just, you know, maybe a couple 100 feet above us. I mean, and it was dead silent. And we could actually see the military jets. It was bright enough outside that you could see the silhouettes of the military jets as they flew over. Yeah. Loud as hell, too. They were just getting on it. I don't think there was no sonic boom, so they weren't supersonic. Yeah. But, you know, they were roaring.
It's interesting because back around the time of the previous episode, 104, I had come across an article. I think it was United pilots. They were traveling south along the shore of Lake Michigan. They were about to cross into the Indiana airspace, but they were still in Chicago airspace, which puts, if you triangulate how they were describing where they were at, puts them right back at the same spot, off the shore of kind of like if you made a triangle coming out of Chicago and Gary, about to the middle of the lake, same basic area where you saw what you did. They reported seeing multiple lights over Lake Michigan at about 20,000 feet. And,
okay.
You know, their account was, description-wise anyway, was almost identical to what you're saying and what was shown in the Unsolved Mysteries episode about this.
Oh, okay.
So
it was, you know, back in the early 90s, it wasn't really something that was you didn't give it a thought. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't something you expected to see. We weren't out there to stargaze or anything. It just happened. But now, since then, I always look up in the sky and looking for am I going to see it again? I think that's a once in a lifetime thing, and but maybe, just maybe. But I've always been kind of fascinated with what's out there since then.
Well, as amazing as that experience was, the one where you saw that in the water, that's confounding. That's something that is, like I said, I've lived here my entire life. I've been around the lake a lot, and there's just no natural thing in Lake Michigan that would be creating a bioluminescence and
right. It was definitely mechanical, but we were the beach at Grand Mirror is not very big.
Right.
I don't know if you've been to that bank. Mm-hmm. I don't know 10 yards, maybe 20.
Back in those days, it was probably 20, 25. With the erosion that's happened and the lake levels, it's probably considerably
and this
less
thing was
now.
Right off in the breakwaters. I mean, it wasn't offshore. It was right on, like they were going to dock, you know. And I honestly thought it was the DNR coming to bust us because we had a campfire going on and it's middle of, midnight and we're not supposed to be there in the first place. And, it was weird. We popped our head up over there, just kind of, it's better to have eyes on them than them have eyes on you kind of thing, Mm-hmm. And we figured, well, we're away from the fire, so they're going to go to the fire and we're going to skip out of here. It was kind of a, clandestine thing, but that whole thing didn't even pop into my head. It was like, well, that's not a boat. Maybe it's a boat, but I don't know. What is that, Jonas? I don't know.
So strange. So, having experienced those two things, and it's obviously left an impression on you because you've held on to it for over 30 years. Yeah. It's not something that you've, oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's.
Well, I don't want to say I didn't forget about it because it wasn't until we started talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I got a story about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that really, it was just a weird thing. It really was.
It's funny you said something about, you see something like that and you would think that it would stay with you to remember like what day and what year it was. But the experience I had here in this neighborhood, in this house, I can't tell you if I was 12, 13, 14.
Right. You just know that.
I just know what happened. And that was, if I close my eyes now, I can see the whole thing over again. And, it was just this entire neighborhood at about 11 o'clock at night lit up brighter than day.
Right. When I was a little kid, I don't know, probably 10 years old or whatever, there was some lights in the sky that everybody in the neighborhood kind of got out and looked at. And my first thought was those spotlights that they do for events, spinning around and stuff like that. But they didn't stay in the same area where, usually they're kind of in the one area.
Yeah.
These things moved around. And this wasn't like broad daylight, but it was late afternoon. And you could still see them late afternoon. And we went down to, I lived in Oak Manor in Niles when I was a kid. There's a church out there called, what the hell is that?
Morris Chapel?
No, it's off, just outside, not First Baptist. It's Assembly of God, or First Assembly of God, I think is what they called it back then. And we rode our bikes out there, and there was a lot of people standing out looking at it. And the thing that I remember was a white truck with one of those satellite dishes on it out in that parking lot of that church. I don't know what the significance of it was, but it just it was an odd thing as we were kids. But I don't really remember too much of that other than going down there and seeing these lights circling around in the sky and zipping back and forth. But I don't believe those were the spotlights I thought they were.
Yeah. It's funny because about 2 years ago, just right here up at Cleveland and Ironwood at the intersection. I was parked next to a vehicle that was a big SUV, like a Suburban. I don't think it was a Tahoe, but I think it was a Suburban. It was white. The windows were really blacked out, and it was SETI, S-E-T-I, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And I was like, what the hell? What are you doing here in South Bend, Indiana? Why are you traversing through northern Indiana? But they were headed north. And when the light changed, both of us continued north. At the point where I turned off to go into my neighborhood, which is almost to the state line, they continued northward. So they were going into Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Another interesting little thing about SETI, if you guys have been paying attention to the news reports as of late with the Titan sub that went down and imploded while taking several multimillionaires and billionaires down to the Titanic. Coincidentally, one of the gentlemen on there sat on the board of SETI. And I'm not saying there is a conspiracy theory behind this, but there are many out there who are drawing attention to that fact. And with all of the disclosure about these things that have been coming out from our government and from whistleblowers and all that stuff, they're trying to draw some kind of correlation to his being on the board of SETI. Whether that's, I mean, it is true that he was on that board, and it's true that they all died in that tragic accident, but...
Or did they?
Or did they?
You know what my first thought was somebody hijacked a sub.
Oh.
Think about that. These terrorists like to use pressure cookers and shit to make bombs.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell's a sub but a big pressure cooker? It's meant to...
Unfortunately, I think they pulled enough pieces out of there that it does resemble the Titan, and unfortunately, I heard
they found parts,
a descriptive analysis of what they found. Still inside those pieces, and that's not good.
It's no different than being in a large bomb. I mean, the concussion just crushes you to mist.
The word that was used in the article that I read was meat paste. Yeah, which is terrible.
Yeah, they didn't suffer long.
Not long. They said they had.
I think that's preferable than waiting 3 days to run out of oxygen.
Yeah, I would agree. I believe they said that at the first sign that there was a fracture in the hull, or when they knew they had that holy shit moment that something was bad, it was about 50 milliseconds.
Yeah. Before
it was done. So, that was probably a much better way to go. So let me ask you, have you been paying attention to the amount of disclosure that's been going on over these past couple of years, and how it seems to have been ramping up here in the...
how they're normalizing UFOs?
Yeah.
They're preparing us for something. That's just what it seems like to me. I don't know. It's like the news media is just kind of gently nudging it. I don't know. It's like they're getting you ready for it.
It's really a strange thing for me, because for so many years of my life, anytime you ever heard anything about UFOs or Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster or anything, in the world of weird, on a major news network. It's always done tongue in cheek. It's usually done around Halloween, and there's never a serious tone to it. And it's really strange for me to see that difference, that change that has taken place, where now things are being talked about in a very serious manner.
Yeah, but they always interject it between some other chaotic bullshit that the government's doing. It's like, oh, and yeah, by the way, the government just declassified 1,000 UFO sightings. And here's John with the weather. Yeah.
It does at times. It does at times to me feel like, hey, look at this.
Yeah. Sleight of hand.
Look at this while we're doing this over here.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors.
We were talking before we started recording. There's a huge dichotomy in the UFO disclosure camp, where you have the people that are of the opinion that these things are benevolent. They're here to help us. They're here to show us the errors of our ways, clean up the earth, stop climate change, that kind of stuff, how to preserve us. And then you have the military aspect of it, which everything is jaded in the theory that they're a threat to national security. They're a threat to our planes in the air. Listening to the Pentagon briefings and stuff, everything out of everyone's mouth is, there's been 10 near misses. Our pilots are experiencing these things in the sky on a daily basis, and we've had a number of near misses. They make everything seem very concerning and very aggressive, and it's really hard to find a camp to plant your flag in on that, because I truly believe that there are other things out there, whether they come from outer space, whether they come from another planet, another solar system, or whether they are coming into this dimension from another, or those things sound insane to say out loud. They really do. I mean, but I don't think you can argue with the fact that there's enough people who are getting pictures and recordings and the stuff that we're getting from our military pilots and stuff that have been released. These things are there. I just don't know that we're ever going to be told the truth as far as why they're here, what their purpose is. I think the government, for the most part, wants us to believe that they're a threat, and then you have the other segment that wants to invite them to dinner and tell us the errors of our way, and let us all be a Greta Greenberg.
I think that the laws of nature and animals and everything, the way nature works, prey and predator and, food chains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anything that's more advanced than you shouldn't be trusted.
Right.
They
got that way because they've done away with things that are
beneath
less
them.
than them.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, there are some people that are, decent, but, for the most part, the humans have pretty much dominated this planet. And, we are, for the most part, as far as we know, top of the food chain.
Yeah.
And we pretty much do as we please, and everything else is below us. Well, what do you think the aliens think of us?
Yeah.
I just can't see any reason why they would come out to help us if it could just as easily enslave us or destroy us and take what they need to do whatever they're here to do.
Yeah. And I don't discount that.
No, it could also be that they're not as advanced and they're just, they're physically bound by the same laws of physics as we are. They bleed just like anybody else, that kind of thing. and it could, from wherever they come from, it's got to cost them time and money or resources to do that.
Right.
So it's not like they're going to do it to just out of curiosity. They're there for a reason. They're not galactic explorers.
Yeah.
They're looking for resources. And that's how I would see anything coming to us, is maybe they would trade, but why would they?
Yeah.
What do they get out of it other than maybe food? Maybe they're eating people. I don't know. You know, could be anything.
I just, this whole thing it's so in your face now. You don't have to look hard to find something new.
Well, if you talk to anybody here, nobody actually thinks you're crazy anymore. If you say, I think I've seen aliens or I've seen UFOs, people are just like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Good for you.
And I also find it very suspect that the initial release of all this information was done right in the heart of the pandemic.
Right.
Where it was like,
we're just going to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
one of the most astounding admissions you could ever ask for from the U.S. government. Yeah. And it happens to come out right during the middle of the worst.
As kind of an offhand side note to it, just kind of got glossed over.
Yeah.
And then some people were paying attention, but most people weren't. You know.
It's a very strange thing, and I cannot help but every time I think about it, I always end up going back to look over here.
Yeah, it's sleight of hand.
That whole thing. We started with the Japanese balloon, right?
Right.
Or the Chinese balloon. Sorry, Japanese. The Chinese balloon, and then a few days later, you got this thing over Alaska that we shoot down, and we can't retrieve it. Now, you got to go back to the balloon. The balloon made its way across America, got over the coast. They took it down, and within 12 hours, they had a SEAL team, they had a support vessel, and an additional vessel on site. They were pulling it out of the water, and they were collecting collecting everything out of the water. But the one that they splashed over Alaska, they said went into icy seas, and they weren't able to recover anything. And then the next one, a day or two later, over the Yukon in Canada, they knocked that one down, and it's in the Yukon, and it's intraversible, and they can't get to it, and they have no idea where it is. And then we have the one over the Great Lakes. Was it Huron or Lake Erie? I don't remember which one.
I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember much about it.
We fire a missile at it and we missed. Where did that other missile go? Is one of my concerns. And then the other one takes it down. Pilots reported having their instrumentation going wonky upon approaching these things. And you're going to tell me that with all of the satellite imagery and all of the tracking and everything that we have at our discretion, that even though we couldn't pull the one out of Alaska and we couldn't pull the one out of the Yukon,
right?
You're telling me we can't pull the one out of the Great Lakes? That doesn't make any sense to me. You pulled the balloon out of the ocean, for God's sakes.
Well, did they miss it, or did it go down? I really didn't pay much attention to it.
Well, the first missile fired missed.
Okay, and now we got giant wildfires in Canada.
And then the second one took it down, but never recovered, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And then there's videos you can see on YouTube of towns in Canada who are having these public town hall meetings where they're trying to get people into these areas to get them to put out the fires, and they're being stonewalled at every turn. It doesn't.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe this. Just this past Monday, I could not believe the amount of smoke that was in our air.
Wasn't that bad?
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, and now there's reports of people over in Europe experiencing it.
Yeah, so much for that climate change thing. Nobody's talking about that now.
Yeah.
It's because it's Canada.
Because the whole world is on fire.
Now, I was reading somewhere that they've got proof that all those fires, there's like 10 of them, the nucleus of those fires all started at the same time.
Very, very close.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
So it's arson, or it's deliberate. I think a lot of our fires out there in California and stuff last year, and believe a lot of those are arsons. It's attrition. It's somebody's letting them off. It fucks up your lumber. It screws up a lot of things. And I think that's just our food places catching fire all over the country.
And how many train derailments?
All near water, water sources that are like the headwaters of places. So yeah, I can't not believe it's not on purpose. It's somebody's doing this. It's not just random. I don't believe in coincidences that much.
Yeah.
Oh, another one just with toxic chemicals that can poison water for 50 years. Oh, okay.
And that's what they're telling us. Yeah. But what if it's not toxic chemicals? What if it's something that they're intentionally trying to get into our water system?
Oh, I don't put that past them either. Who are they? But then you get to that point. A lot of crazy shit going on. So, you want to throw space aliens in there, that's the least of my worries at this point.
Unless they come down with blasters.
That would be cool. I mean, at least I'd go out being like, yeah, now I know. All right.
There was a time where my son and I had a discussion that it's like, nuclear war, all of the things that could potentially end us or put a severe hit to the number of people that are on this planet. What would you rather experience? And my son was like, screw it. Nuclear war. Yeah. It'll be over. I don't have to worry about it and any of that. And myself, I used to think, a zombie apocalypse would be the one that I would go for, because at least you had a chance to, shoot, kill. You could spend your days killing things and eventually maybe they'd find a cure for it. But
see, I always, well, not always, but my thought was, when I was a kid, even my dad would say, it's not going to be nuclear war. It's going to be a super bug that kills everybody else, a big plague. And, then you watch like, what was that? Steven Spielberg's The Stand. Isn't that how isn't that how
that was Stephen King.
Stephen King, that's right. Isn't that how he ends the world in that book? As a super bug got loose?
Yeah.
Well, and then you start with this pandemic and the way they're talking about it, that scared the hell out of me. I thought that was our extinction level event. I thought that's what was coming. Somebody created it, finally decided to let it loose. And, I'm still not certain that it's not, because I think people are still dying from it. But, there's so many things going wrong right now. So many things up in the air. And maybe it has a lot to do with our access to information. It was easy to hide shit 40 years ago. All right. Now anybody with a phone can take pictures and send it to anybody on the planet right now.
Yeah.
It's hard to hide stuff. So I think they're just coming out with it. It's like, well, we can't hide it any longer. They're going to find out. Let's start getting them used to the idea. Let's, just the tip just for a minute kind of thing, And I noticed like the last year, like you were saying, the news is just kind of planting little seeds of, the extraterrestrial or UFOs or whatever.
Well, I think you have to look at, what happened here just, it's probably 2 weeks ago now, out west in Las Vegas, with that family that, you know, literally said something landed in their backyard. Right. And, you know, and they videotaped, and, you know, the video is dark and it's hard to tell. I've seen some people take that video and lighten it up. Does it look like there's something back there? Yeah, I can see that it looks funky. Doesn't look right. Whether it's been manipulated or not by, you know, computer generated images, I don't know.
Well, they said that they've seen beings too, like 8 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly.
Dark creatures, big eyes.
And, you know, the thing that really kind of got me was, one of the police officers, there was a video, who was stopping another car that was in that neighborhood, and he was asking them if they had seen anything. And he said, you know, this is not something I really buy into, but he's like, my partner saw it, and that's good enough for me. So, you know, that's why we're continuing to investigate. But apparently, you know, a 3-letter agency had come in and entered the picture, and subsequent reports by the police say that their body cam footage and everything had been scrubbed, that the videos were removed, and
oh, no shit.
You know, and then the family pretty much went dark after the initial release. They weren't talking much about it anymore. So,
but one thing that's nice about it, you know, we're talking about maybe whether they're benign or malevolent. Mm-hmm. Well, at least they got shitty spacecrafts, because they seem to wreck them a lot. You know, maybe they're not. They're still testing out their stuff, you know. Maybe they're not there yet. I don't know. Because
you know what? It's funny because, you know, like, you go back and, you know, like Gordon Cooper, who was part of the NASA program. He, prior to being in NASA, was working on a top secret program, and he was actually part of a crew of people who filmed the landing of a saucer and the inhabitants of, back before he even got into the NASA program. And he was responsible for turning over that film footage after viewing it to send it up the chain of command, and
what footage?
Gone. Yeah, completely, you know, so.
Make copies.
You know, and the other thing is interesting is, like, when you talk to, or when you hear Bob Lazar talk to anybody, you know, for years and years, a lot of people said that Bob Lazar was nuts, and, you know, everybody's trying to discredit that he didn't work at S4. And, but his description of how compartmentalized everything was, you know, he was working on these things, but he was only working on the propulsion system.
Right.
He was not allowed to engage with or have conversations with anybody else who was working on, say, you know, the navigation or the materials that it was made out of, or any of the other things. He was only allowed access to what they wanted him to work on, and that was the propulsion. You know, and the more that this comes out, like from our government with the Pentagon hearings and stuff like that, and the people that they've had talking in front of Congress, it is very apparent that what he described as that compartmentalization is actually very, very true, because these people have, you know, they're people in the ATIP program, which was to investigate aerial phenomenon, were not being given the information from other 3-letter agencies who had reports of these other things. They were being kept from the actual group that was studying it. So, you know, I don't think we've come to a point where we're going to learn the truth. But I do think we're getting close to the point where some part of the truth is going to be used against us.
Yeah. our buddy and I were talking about that when we both had noticed the influx of stories about UFOs kind of in the mainstream media, and it's like they're prepping us for something, but what are they prepping us for?
Yeah.
And I can't remember what there was a project or some kind of thing that came through that where they would fake a alien invasion to bring about the one world government or something like that, to bring the human,
Yeah, there's been
species together against one common foe. Kind of thing.
There's been a lot of talk about the use of Project Bluebeam.
Is it Bluebeam? I would Blue
Yeah.
Book. I couldn't remember what it was.
And that's supposed to be the use of holographic images that are indiscernible from being real or fake. To me, I have a hard time buying into that, the use of holographs to usher this in. But what I don't have a hard time believing is that if we've been working on the reverse engineering of these craft, because like you said, they don't have good mechanic and they tend to crash, or they're shot down, whatever it may be. I think Stephen Greer makes a pretty good point to show that the reverse engineering of this stuff and our intentional replication to the best of our ability to replicate these vehicles and have them move in a manner that is similar to, maybe we can't achieve the speeds, maybe we can't achieve the high speed counter direction that they can do, but if we're creating these craft and a number of them so that we can actually put them in the sky and have people see a legitimate UFO, maybe that's enough to usher in what you're talking about.
Well, the drones we have now are very passable for a lot of the stuff we see now. Those racing drones that you've seen, those things fast, man.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine 30 years ago something like that, but on a bigger scale, I can't, of course the noise would give them away.
That's the whole thing. I mean, even I know that the military is supposed to have whisper drones that have much less sound to them, but I don't know that they've been able to eliminate the sound completely.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe at a higher altitude it's not as noticeable. May sound more like a hum or maybe I don't know. Right. But I truly think that this is all coming to a head because somebody's got something up their sleeve.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But what is that thing? And who is it? Who are they?
Yeah. Yeah. My guess they are the elites.
Yeah.
Well, John, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a great hour spent with you. It's been a while since we got to hang out, and I appreciate having a couple of beers with you and talking about this weird stuff.
Sure, anytime, man. It was fun. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, my friend. All right, folks, like I always say, stay uncomfortable.
Be nice to each other.